Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2:06, and it is officially my fault that we're starting late. Thank you guys for coming. Erik and Nick were here perfectly on time. I was running late, so I apologize for the 6-minute delay. But we have the great honor today of having Erik Bergrud and Nick Vasos on our show, the fantastic entertainment announcement team for the Kansas City Comets, the Missouri Comets, sorry. I'm so used to Kansas City Comets. That was like an old thing. It's okay. So thank you guys for coming on. Welcome to the show.
City Comets.
What is it?
It's Kansas City Comets.
But wasn't it Missouri Comets for a bit?
Yeah, well, it was Missouri Comets.
Oh, now
Yeah.
it's Kansas City. I've got the timelines mixed up.
Okay,
That,
that's another fine. You're late. That's $100. Now you get the name wrong. Another 100. You're off to a
Nick,
terrible start.
that just goes to show you how long I've been around. That I'm not sure which iteration it is. It's the Missouri Comets, Kansas City Comets. That just goes to tell you I've been around too long.
It's all good. It's all good.
Well, anyway, thank you guys for coming on and taking the time on a Saturday afternoon. I appreciate your time.
Well, we already have a Corey Keats fan who's jumped into our chat too, so it started really early. I know that they're excited out on the West Coast.
Corey Keats, he's the Kansas City Comets killer, right? He's the hero.
Oh,
that's exactly right.
Yeah. Every game. He's the hero every game.
Every game.
That started in the MASL All-Star game.
That's right.
And then it came through the first game of the season in the COVID year when we came back and won in overtime at KC. And I want to say, and last year he scored a toe poke top on a power play goal in Kansas City too. Yeah.
The only time it didn't work, Nick, was when we played downtown at T-Mobile Center. That was like the only time.
That's one of those games that's actually been manually deleted from my memory. That was a manual delete because the score line was so atrocious that I don't think that actually ever happened. It's one of those ones that just manually went in and said that one's gone.
Hey, why are you guys so good on the road? It feels like when Tacoma goes on the road, whether it's another psyche mentality or whatever else, you just seem to play so well, better than other teams.
Do you know what? I'm going to say something which is going to get me in trouble. One, when we come on the road to the East Coast, I happen to think that the brand of soccer in the East and the West is so different that our style of play actually does really well against the East. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big factor. But I also think that because there's so many, like when we go on the road, like when we play Ontario, last year we beat Empire, sorry. See, look at that. Now it's another fine, Nick. We're only like 5 minutes into the show. I've already got 3 fines. When we play Empire, we have so much history with that team that it's almost like if we don't win at home, which this year we didn't, we have to go prove a point in Empire. We have to go prove a point in San Diego. And I think that we're kind of an underdog type team. We have that feel. So when we go on the road, there's a real like willingness and desire to show. And I think that I'm going to take your point as an excellent thing to work on next year is we need to be better at home because people wouldn't think we were good away if we were that good at home.
That's a follow-up, Nick. I'm curious, what differences do you see between West Coast teams and East Coast teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to like super simplify it, and I'm not going to try to, but if you simplified it a little bit and you thought of the West Coast team, I think West Coast teams have more individual talent that is set up in a way of playing where the individual talent maybe shines a bit more. And I think the East Coast teams, mostly probably from the MISL historic, have really high level coaching with very structured type of play. And so I think that the free flowing sort of highly technical free flowing play of the West is really hard to play if you're super structured and vice versa. So I feel like when we go out there and we catch a highly structured team and we have players that are able to do something a little bit different outside of the structure, it's very hard for teams to play against.
Nick, it could also be that some of the Eastern teams want to kill each other, and they're more focused on defense and holding, and not so much the technical skill.
I mean, I think that goes for both divisions, right? We're so used to playing San Diego and Empire that we could tell you every player they've ever played. You know, we could tell you how they play, who they play, and then we go and play a team on the East that we haven't seen as much, and sometimes the matchup would lead us to believe that it would be easy or hard, and it really isn't, right? We did really well against Baltimore a couple of years ago, and Baltimore are always Baltimore, right? And there was no reason for us to beat Baltimore, especially how poorly of a season we had last year, or not this last year, the year before. but the matchup really worked for us. So sometimes it's matchups. And to be honest, the matchup with KC for the Stars was never a really positive one. But last year, and in COVID, I guess we had, I think we beat them both times in COVID, and then last year as well. So matchups.
Yeah, talk about the All-Star game during that COVID year. It was really strange. All the games were played here in Kansas City, but they were all uber competitive. I mean, really, in that it was the play on the field was just incredible, and it was intense. And we also got a sense, we tried to get some insight from you, like having live conversations with each of the All-Star coaches on headsets. And I remember Erik and I trying to talk to you on the headset, and it was almost impossible to talk to you. You were like not having any of it at all. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about the All-Star game, and what were your thoughts about broadcasting kind of invading your area of the coaching realm? What you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, let's go. First off, the All-Star game was awesome. I think the fact that we could even put that game on was a testament to the Kansas City Comets, and obviously Lane and us and kind of everybody partnering together to make that even event happen, which was amazing because it was more than just a game. It was, we're in COVID, there should be no way to play, and we're going to put this game on, and it's going to be well attended, and no one's going to get sick, and we're going to have a successful outcome, and we brought all these players together. So it was and I remember telling Lane at the time, this might not feel that cool right now, but in 10 years time or 15 years time, when we look back and think about the world that was happening in COVID and that we were able to put this game on, what an amazing accomplishment. So I'm bummed we don't have an All-Star game every year. I'm bummed that we haven't had one this last season. I'm bummed that we don't have one now. I'm bummed that we won't have one. I don't know when we'll have one, but I'm bummed about that. I think it's a really big opportunity lost. And then on the coaching invading the broadcast, man, that is really tough. I mean, when you watch coaches come off the field sort of in the Premier League, and they come off and you can see their faces are just like highly passionate, and they've got to go stand in front of reporters and they answer angrily, it makes perfect sense. Like, that makes sense to me. You're in the heat of the moment. You haven't had a chance to digest your thoughts. And then in an indoor, there's like a million variables, right? There's like, who's on their shift? How long has it been? Is that their third foul? Is it their fourth foul? Like, there's so many things. So somebody talking in your ear is like, listen, man, this is not going to work. You can't be talking to me right now. This isn't going to happen. But was that cool for you guys? I mean, from a broadcast team, was that like something special for you guys to go do an All-Star game, not the Kansas City Comets?
Well, you want to start? I'll jump in real quick, and I'll say yes. Nick and Erik, Erik knows this here. We're pretty fortunate in Kansas City, is that we've tried a lot of things that the league is thinking about implementing. It's almost like they're testing things out here in Kansas City, and that was one of the things. We had the capabilities of doing it with our broadcast team, and I think it adds so much for the fans to have some insight and to see some real interaction between the coaches, and to have someone with a personality like you, Nick. I mean, it was, your chat was short, but it was intense. And Erik and I got the picture during the broadcast. But having those opportunities to show a different area of the league as opposed to just the game itself, what's going on inside, what are players thinking, is something that I think that fans love. And I consider myself a fan, and that was one thing that I just really thought gave some great insight into the game.
I would just add that not only that game, Nick, but that whole year changed how we broadcast, how Nick Vasos and I broadcast, because there were so many fans whose teams were sitting out that year that we got a lot of MASL fans who came in. And then with COVID restrictions, it changed how we set up our pregame shots. It really caused us to think a little bit about who our audience was. And I think that all of that together put us on a trajectory to do the broadcast differently than we otherwise would have.
Well, we've got this show, Stars Align. It used to be, we started it in COVID, which was happy hour, right? And we kind of went away from it, and now we brought it back. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Empire Strikers team on here talking about their broadcasting. And we had a long debate about neutrality and how to play with neutrality. And I do remember, and I'm going to call one of you two out. I'm not sure who it was. I think it might have been you, Nick. But there is a time, there was a game against the Kansas City Comets, and it was 3 or 4 years ago, and you're talking about something, and I scored a goal, and it happened to be a pretty good goal, but we were losing by 5 or 6. And I think you were going, Nick Perera is double shifting himself here, and I dribbled like 3 guys and scored, and you go, and goal. And I was like, man, that was a good goal, Nick Vasos. What the heck, man? That was a really good goal. And it's like, and it was like a and goal, and that's why he plays himself in a double shift. There you go, and on to the next thing. And I was like, come on, man, give me some more love. So talk about neutrality. Talk about that. Is that something you guys consciously have a discussion around? Like, this team's coming to town. Are there rivalries? I mean, you guys had a little bit of a Milwaukee Waves sort of back and forth last year with their like on the field. Does that influence how you guys do your job?
You take this one first.
Oh man, where to start? I think to start, Nick, both Nicks, we're employees of the Kansas City Comets. So we are Comets broadcasters, but we also recognize 2 things. One is to do our job really well, we have to do our research, and the audience, there's so many visiting fans because we don't have 2 different streams. So say Tacoma comes to town next season. There'll be a lot of Tacoma fans watching our broadcast. So we intentionally do more research on the road team than maybe some other broadcast teams do. We get dinged by our own fans for being not
too nice
homers. Yeah, not being homers. So I'll take that as a badge of courage, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it's knowing your audience, and when Tacoma comes to town, and by the way, Nick, I mean it's a great reminder, and it also is a reminder that I think a lot of players and I think a lot of coaches watch our broadcasts, and they keep the volume up. I don't, probably not all of them, but I know a lot of them do. They've told us that they watch and they listen to our broadcasts, and Erik and I are keenly aware of it. What we say is going to be listened to by players, by coaches. So that's important to us, is that we provide context, and if it was a good goal, I should have given it a Shazam or something like that.
Now that I'm hearing it, I think it was actually Erik, and I'll find it and send it to you guys, and you'll see it. It was one of those ones where I think I get the ball in the corner, I dribbled a couple guys, and I shot it with my left or something, and it was a good goal, but we were losing by a heavy amount. And you guys were mid-rant. Someone was mid-rant, right? And it's like mid-rant and goal. It was
that was probably me.
Yeah, I think it was
That was
Erik.
probably me.
But
hey, the fact that I noticed you double shifted, I mean, hey,
listen,
right.
every broadcast team in the league has something that they do that they're like remembered for. I would say you guys are, I will give Baltimore and Milwaukee this too, and I think its historical context is going to help a bit. But I think you guys, in terms of your on-field knowledge about what is actually happening, are really, really high in terms of seeing what you're seeing, knowing what's going on. I used to joke with my wife because Art Kramer, who does for the Wave, used to be Keith Tozer's assistant coach back in the day before I got to the Wave. And we would always laugh because on the in-game broadcast, Tozer would call a timeout, and he'd go, watch out for the 2-pass over here with Giuliano come around the corner. And it would be the 2-pass with Giuliano, or, like whatever it was that he would call would come out. And we would always laugh and because he'd seen it before, right? But I think in terms of in-game knowledge of what you guys are watching, you guys are really, really sharp. And again, not to take credit away from you, but it also comes from repetition, right? Being around the game a lot, seeing a lot of games, seeing a lot of players, having a chance to talk to coaches. And again, Wayne Dan's comment about the pregame and the halftime interviews, I think are great. And during COVID, I remember even you had one with Vinny that was on our team, Vinny Dantas at the time. And so those interviews are so cool because it just adds color to the people of this league. And I think the people of this league are particularly interesting as well, because we're not making $10 million a year to do this. So there's a little bit more character to it. But yeah.
Well, Nick, Erik and I have had so many conversations about, not just our broadcasts, but in terms of the league, while we represent the Comets and we're employed by the Comets, we're also a representative of the greater MASL and the message and the players and like you, Nick. I mean, when you come to town, Erik and I are in our pregame inner chats. We're saying, okay, who are we going to highlight? who are we going to interview? Are we going to hire who's hot right now? And typically it's Nick Perera. I mean, you've got a 2-time MVP. You lead the league in scoring. You are going to be a factor. We are going to talk about you because you are one of the stars in the league. And so while we're doing a game that's local between Kansas City and Tacoma, there's a greater message about the MASL that Erik and I are trying to capture and let fans know that if somebody's there watching for the first time, who are these two teams? What is this MASL? We're trying to let people know that this game here has been around for 4 decades, at least here in Kansas City and in Tacoma. And so that's worth something. This indoor game has been around longer than MLS. And while it's not as popular as MLS, it does have a very what do I want to say? Help me with a word here, Erik. It's got a
loyal following.
Loyal following. That's what I'm trying to say. It does, and the games matter, and so bigger picture is something that we also try to keep in mind in our broadcasts.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, go ahead, Erik. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and we have fans who will tell you how Kansas City was wronged by the San Diego Sockers back in 1988, the long memories. And so part of the challenge for us is we want to acknowledge the different generations of indoor soccer, but instead of what I call ancestor worshiping, only focusing on the past, how do you thread the conversation so people appreciate what you have now? The technical play now. I mean, if you go back and pop in, if you even have a VCR and a VHS tape, if you pop in the old VHSs, the game has evolved in I think a positive way over these 4 decades. And really, if you take a step back, you appreciate the talent that's on the field now.
Well, that's a great point. So one of the things we've been doing in this offseason for the Stars is we've been trying to have a really big emphasis on community engagement, right? We've really been trying to say, how do we impact our community? How do we get in front of fans? How do we have a relationship with fans between the Stars, the players, the organization as a whole, and the fans? And actually, we had an event at the end of July, and we've got another one next weekend, which, by the way, that QR code in the top right corner over there is so that you guys can get your tickets for our August 19th game at 4 p.m. against the Whistle All-Stars. The Whistle is a local league we have, which is kind of like an M2, but it's a Washington-based league. And a lot of our players, the same way you guys have Park College, we have a lot of players that come through the Whistle that play in our leagues and get a bunch of games in, and then we can pick up and scout. And so we've got amazing success stories. So we're going to play against an all-star team from them next weekend at 4. We had an event where we had a woman, her name was Sally, and she showed up with original memorabilia from the 1980s and 78, 76, or 86 seasons. She had a box full of stuff, life-size posters of Neil Megson and Jumpin' Joey Waters. I mean, amazing stuff that she pulled out of this box. And we called it a fan fest. And so fans came into our little training facility. They looked around the stuff. It was like a reminiscence of where we are. And then we finished with a game. So we've been really trying to do that and trying to engage. And I think that you're spot on that there's something about that ancestral worshiping. And actually, by the way, after the game, Chris Toth was in town, and a bunch of guys actually went over to Lane Smith's house, and he, who is like the biggest Tacoma Stars fan in history, popped on the original final Game 7 against the Dallas Sidekicks, and we sat and watched a 2-hour game, and it has changed. I mean, the technical ability of those guys is really high, but it's a lot of 1v1 scenarios. There's not a lot of team defending. There's like less tactical sort of awareness, a lot of transition, really transitional. Kind of like the Kansas City Comets when Vlatko was coaching, that were on the counter, and there was transitional moments that were really, really fun to watch. So yeah, it's really changed. And I always tell people, I think personally, it's the hardest part of finding a coach in this league. It's really hard because the game has changed so much that all those people that played it 20, 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, if they haven't actively kept up with where indoor soccer is today, it would be really hard for them to transition into that. So you guys have a new coach, Stefan Stokic, who is new. I mean, last year he was there. I mean, talk a little bit about where you think that's going to go and how that helps.
So I'll talk about that. Remind me to talk about that Game 7 because I actually watched it live on satellite. I have some questions for you about Tattoo and what he learned from that experience as a coach. But with Stefan, you mentioned Vlatko Andonovski. I expect to see the Comets reverting back a little bit to the game, the style that Vlatko coached here. They got killed. I guess I'm still an employee of the Comets, but I'll say it. They got killed on the transition the last several years. And I mean, I don't think it was a state secret. In fact, I think I said it on half the broadcast the last couple of years, is that's how teams were picking the Comets apart. And so I think you're going to see a little bit more discipline. I think that they were still trying to figure out, and Nick, you've had some experience about this, the player coach versus the assistant on the bench, and what does that mean in terms of tactics and adjustments in game. And so yes, you'll see a nucleus of the Comets team you saw last year, but I expect they're going to pull back style-wise from that dominant, you said it earlier, Missouri Comets era.
Mm-hmm. For one, I expect Stefan to have more control. I know control is probably not probably not the correct word, but I think he'll have more influence over what players end up on the roster this season. I also think that Stefan will be a little bit more firm than Leo was in the past about how they are going to play. And I do believe what Erik said is true. I believe they're going to go back to the way that sort of Vlatko ran the teams back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, when they won the title in 13 and 14. But really, all of the players they're going through Stefan. They're not going through Brian Budzinski, or they're not going through Leo. Stefan really has a big part in who is going to end up on this team. So we'll see some familiar faces, of course, back on the team, but I think we might see some different players also. So, Stefan Stokic has a ton of history in this game. You know, he was a part of was it MISL 3, and then in the MASL. So he's got over decades of playing experience in the league, and I know he's learned from Vlatko. He was under Leo, and I know he's got some ideas about how he wants things done. So it should be a little bit different look on the field this year when the Comets take to the blue turf.
Well, I'm excited to see it, and obviously Stefan's one of those guys that there's a couple of these characters in the indoor league that I feel like I've been around a long time, but when I actually look up their date of birth, like Stefan, I think is younger than me, which this can't be right. That's just, there's no way that's possible. I'm 37. I think he's my age or younger. I don't know. But I feel like Stefan Stokic's been playing indoor since 1987. Like he's just been around it that long. It's the same with Adriano Dos Santos from Baltimore. He always tells he's younger than me, and I'm like, it's impossible. That can't be right that you are younger than me. I started playing when I was 23, 24. So that's now 14 years or whatever it's been. And those guys predate me, but they're somehow younger. I don't get it. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think Vlatko's style was really hard to play against. I mean, we obviously, back in those days, those sort of Wave Comets games were epic. I mean, those were some incredible rivalry and matches. And I can remember one in particular that we were down by, 100 points. And then we came back in the fourth quarter and Ian Bennett scored 5 goals. And we turned around and won that game some way, somehow. In overtime, Ian scored his 5th goal of the game. That was when it was multi-point games. I also remember a playoff game the year that you guys won it that I think 3 of the 5 or 6 goals that the Comets scored were own goals. One of them was off a corner that Byron Alvarez comes around, whips it in and hits somebody in the back. So those games were really epic, but there was a heavy transitional component to Vlatko's teams that was, man, when the Comets caught you on a counter, you were in trouble. I mean, really, really big trouble. And at the time it was, you guys had not just, Leo and Stefan running up and down the field, but you had Sosa was probably running up and down the field a bit more than he does these days in terms of his style of play. You had Lucas was running up and down the field, Lucas Rodriguez. You had Vahid running up and down the field. Byron Alvarez was there. And I'm trying to think, Jason was there. So there was some epic players that played on those games. And Danny Waltman, of course, at the time, who is now at Tacoma Stars, has been always a legend, was in goal for you guys. And I remember the Danny saves of the Kansas City Comets or the Missouri Comets. Danny saves every time there was a save, and I remember there were times that I've told Danny this many times, but there were times we'd head to the locker room after a game, and Tozer is a serial winner when he coaches, right? I don't think he always cares what it looks like. He wants to win. But there were times where we'd lose and he'd come into the locker room and be like, Danny Waltman. And you'd be like, yeah, Danny Waltman. And there really wasn't much else to say about the game, right? Like he would pull out some saves and you'd be like, okay. But I'm looking forward to it. And again, we love coming to Kansas City. Every time that I don't know, last week we had 2 rookies on the team. We asked them where their favorite stadium to play at was last year. They said Kansas City. So it's a really fun place to play. And I happened last year to that was where we opened we had played that. We were game 3. That was a crazy thing. We were on game 3. You guys were on game 9. So it was a really crazy one. So for us, we had been 3.5 weeks off because it was Christmas and New Year's was in the middle. I think it was like January 7th, I think we played. And we had played last December 10th. So we had this massive time off. And you guys had started early and played St. Louis a bunch of times. And so by the time that we came into town, we did not know what was going to happen. I was expecting we weren't going to win that game. And as all games with Kansas City and Tacoma, it was crazy. And actually, you guys were on the 6th attacker right at the end of the game. And I think we pulled one out, stole one, and Tyler John ran at the length of the field with an empty netter. But it was getting tight again. And I remember there was a collision with your goalkeeper. And then we were all stopped thinking that the play was going to stop. And then there was a couple rebounds and you guys scored. And that sort of took a 10-minute break for the referees to set everybody back and get us going again. But yeah, incredible memories in that stadium. And we hope to get to come back this year and hopefully we get to come back and win. So yeah, I mean, I think we've got, listen, on this show, we talk non-traditional. So we have games. I've got all kinds of things you guys are going to do to put your foot in your mouth. So I'll set you up for that. If you saw the Empires one, we're going to go around the league and you're going to pick your favorite goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, targets, but we're going to stick to the East this time. So are you guys ready for that? Are you okay with that? You're not going to have any danger?
Let's go.
Let's go.
Okay. We're gonna remove the Kansas City Comets. Okay, so that you guys don't do anything that is untoward and you don't have to go back into your office and then have someone say, I can't believe you didn't pick somebody. Okay, so they are no longer in the picture. I'll have you guys each pick a goalkeeper from the East that you guys think is particularly good. Is there a goalkeeper from the East that you guys particularly admire? Neto doesn't count, or none of the KC goalies count.
Man, I'm going to get in trouble no matter what I say, Nick Vasos. Maybe you should go first.
I might get in trouble by saying this, but I got to say William Vanzella. I mean, every time. I mean, the Comets and the Blast have had a rivalry, and sometimes it has been bitter, and sometimes it has been nasty. I mean, very nasty. And so for any Comet employee to say something nice about Baltimore may get your head bitten off, but I cannot resist. William Vanzella, for as long as he has been in this league, for as much as he loves this league, as much as he loves to play and loves to win, and he's consistently done it over so many years that I can't tell you how many times he's broken the heart of Comets fans. And I just, his professionalism, and you love to hate him a lot of times when you play against him. I mean, he's easy to hate, but damn, is he good. So I'm picking Vanzella.
So I was going to do that, but since you already got him, I'm going to go in a different direction. So
good for you, Eric, because you could have totally pretended that you would have never given Baltimore any props. You could have been like, oh, I can't believe that you did that, Nick. But good for you for saying the truth there.
So how about the unsung hero of the soccer tournament this summer, Paulo?
Yeah.
So he has an ACL injury, and you saw the difference with St. Louis with Paulo and without Paulo. He came back last year and gave the Comets fits. Every time he comes to Kansas City, he's a threat to score. The confidence level, what he does in the locker room, and I think that imagine what his stats would be like. Imagine how many awards and trophies he would have, perhaps if he were in another setting. The guy is unbelievable. And I think what's unfortunate for him in terms of legacy, he won't have the record that some of your keepers, Chris Toth, Danny Waltman will have at the end of it. But if you look at talent, ability, read the game, the X factor, Paulo.
I think it's an excellent point. And again, now that we've opened that can of worms, and we'll go on to defenders next, it is a tough discussion around when it comes to final awards time. And I remember actually you two guys being proponents of Boris winning the final award for MVP last year, and that whole discussion. What a great
offense.
Around. What's that? No,
no offense.
Okay. You're allowed to. I mean, you can be objectively wrong, which is fine too, you know. But what a great discussion around like individual talent or ability versus team collective awards. I remember having a huge discussion with a player who will not be named, who said, well, I've won more championships than X, Y, and Z. So therefore, I must be of a higher caliber than X, Y, and Z. And I remember debating the opposite, saying, I don't agree with that comment, because I think that individual talent or players who have ability or talent who are on a team where there's maybe less competitive level, or they know they're not going to win every single game, does that make them worse or does that make them better because they're playing it under circumstances that are more difficult? So I agree with your comment about Paulo. And on a personal level, in that Kansas City All-Star game, I actually met Paulo. I'd never met him and chatted with him. And he's like completely calm, nicest human ever, super respectful, you know, yes, sir, and no, sir. And I think he's got to be in his 40s. He's like 42 or 43. He looks younger than anybody. He's like amazing health, great human being, and very, very, super respectful. And it's so hard to know because when you play against these guys, you don't actually know who the good ones are, right? You don't know this guy's like a stand-up human being. And he was a really good stand-up human. So Paulo was a really cool dude. And Vanzella, there's nothing you can say about him other than the guy wins. He just wins. He's a serial winner. He came to San Diego. He won. He went to Baltimore. He won. He knows what to do. He communicates. He's probably the loudest goalkeeper in the league in terms of like, you know, orders and talking. You see how mad he gets when he gives up a goal, even when his team is up by 10, right? His team's winning by 10 and he gives up a goal. You can see what it means to him. So I think it's really fantastic. Both of those goalkeepers are huge for the league. Okay, defenders in the league. You guys have some good ones on the East.
We just got a good one, Chad Vandergriff. That's going to be huge. And I would have answered this question differently about 3 months ago, but with Florida not competing, it shakes things up. Not to say that Vandergriff will be the end all for Kansas City, but automatically, if you see where some of the weaknesses were last year, he improves. So if you take Kansas City out of it, I'll throw a name, and it'll also show that I watched Goals and Boards the other night. Look at what happened to Utica, where they started the year, and then when Darren Toby came back, having a clutch defender, I think, is critical. And that was a team that, like Kansas City, wanted to score 10 goals every game and didn't really, maybe not as honest defensively as they could have been. Was huge. But I mean, a lot of those two-way, you know, the scoring defenders get a lot of credit, and I get it. And sometimes they win the awards, but the stay-at-home defender is the goalkeeper's and the coach's best friend.
Dad's teammate, Rafa Alves, guys, he had a really nice year last year. And I mean, he was one of the better defenders in the league, and probably should have gotten more votes for Defender of the Year than he did. Now, I don't know where Rafa, and you guys can tell me if you know where he's playing. I don't know if he's signed anywhere yet.
I don't know. I think a lot of the Florida players have yet to be sort of confirmed. I know for sure Ricky went to Milwaukee. And
Drew went to Milwaukee.
And Drew went
Ruggles?
to Milwaukee.
Drew went to San Diego.
Oh, San Diego. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think
he did play in Milwaukee, but now San Diego.
I think a couple of those guys have still not sort of pronounced where they're going to go yet.
Oh, I think Erik is right. There are two ways that you can look at a defender: a two-way defender who has offense and defensive capabilities, or the stay-at-home defender. I'm choosing the stay-at-home with Rafa Alves, but don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of the two-way players as well, like Drew Ruggles. I think he's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Lance, who used to play for the Milwaukee Wave, is sending in about Evan McNeely, who played for the Stars for a long time, and the Wave obviously too, and some other franchises. And he certainly was able to do it on both ends, and that's what he's saying, left-footed bangers. But yeah, Evan was a stalwart for a long time. We've got him on our bench now, actually. He hangs out. He's an assistant coach, and he's done an amazing job with us on that side. I think the defender conversation when we come around awards is really complicated too, because as you say, Darren Toby probably doesn't show up in any of the categories in terms of being like, is this guy leading the league in any categories? But I agree with you that the influence of those players is tremendous, and it's hard to tell. We had one in Milwaukee back in the day, which was Joe Hummus. I don't know if you guys remember, Big Joe Hammer.
Oh yeah,
and he would get 5 or 6 goals a year, maybe on restarts, but he was stay at home defender, never lost the ball, hammered people. He was that kind of guy that would never show up in an award show, but was a big time player. And I think there's a lot of players in this league. And when you get to Defender of the Year, what is the comment? What is the stat that proves it to you? I remember, must have been 5 or 6, 7 years ago, Rob Acosta won Defender of the Year because he led the league in blocks. I don't know if you guys remember this. And his team, I think, was 2-24 or 2-22. And so there was a whole debate around why would that defender get it versus another one. So I think it's really interesting to analyze that and talk about it. But both defenders mentioned are important players in their team and in the league, obviously.
Well,
midfielders.
And Nick, I was going to say last year, San Diego Sockers fans really proactively got defensive about this because they assumed that nobody was going to vote for any Sockers defenders because they weren't scoring goals. And so this became a little banner during broadcasts and on social in terms of nobody respects San Diego's defense. Well, I mean, can tell you how I voted, but
we play against San Diego all the time, and I can tell you, I think that they've got if there's 5 top defenders in the league, there's 2 of them that play on their team, and I think that my opinion is Cesar Cerda is one of the hardest players to play against and one of the most complete defenders in the league in terms of his ability to impact the game offensively, defensively, his leadership. He's gritty. He's hard to play against. He can score goals, as he did in the All-Star game. I think he scored 2. And he's very technical. You don't expect him to be technical, but he's very, very good. So, he's fantastic. And then on a target marking defenders, I think, Pino is a really tough player to play against. Has been for a long time.
Cardenas
and Mitch.
Yep.
And Mitchell Cardenas is a fantastic defender too. So, I mean, in terms of awards, like I said, I voted for the players that I think as players are the best in their position, regardless of sort of team direction. But obviously, if you're winning 23 out of 24 games, not fun fact. Nick Perera played for the San Diego Sockers. It's true. Also true. But yeah, it's a tough category to vote for defenders. We've got, we've got some defenders on our team. Obviously, Alex Caceres and Corey, who are very different in the way they play the game, right? Alex is technical, very good with his left foot, can shoot, can score. Corey doesn't lose the ball, very organized, good organizer. I mean, they're just so different. It's hard to weigh one versus the other, especially when it comes to that kind of award. But yeah, I mean, I think midfielders and targets will probably be easier because their categories are fairly easily defined, right? Like we know what to look for in the stats. But midfielders in the East, let's hear some.
Well, an oldie but goodie, Max Ferdinand. So he midfield forward, right? But if you look at he left Milwaukee. Milwaukee sort of had problems adjusting when that combination with Bennett and Ferdinand was there. I don't know that St. Louis was a good fit for him. Look at the run that Baltimore made at the end of last season and the leadership that he brought. Granted, he's on the older side, but still
careful
player.
Careful.
I know. Hey,
careful. Careful now.
Hey, we're older than everybody, so it's all right.
There's old, there's soccer old, and there's everything in between that. So yeah, careful. No, I'm kidding. I've joked about this for so long. Last year, I got called old like a million times. I don't know how many times I got called old. It was like, this guy's 36. And I'm like, yeah, 36. Like, that's not old. What are we talking about? Oh, my gosh. I can't believe he's still playing. Somebody walked up to me at the end of the season last year and ran up and shook my hand and was like, great game. And he goes, someone just told me you're 36. That's crazy. And I was like, Is it? Because Leo Gibson, how old's Leo?
Just turned 40, huh?
Yeah.
Leo Gibson is up there can still do it like anybody. So, Ian Bennett has got to be 40, 41 maybe? 39, 40? I don't know.
39, 40, yeah.
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 And Ian Bennett's still doing it season in, season out. So, I saw Doug Miller running around the field at 52. So, hey, man, it's all possible.
That dude could play.
Nick Vasos, who's your midfielder?
No, I don't. I like. I'm going back to Florida again? Victor Pereras, to me, is just an outstanding player. Has all of the skill and talent in the world. He knows the game. He's smart, and he's consistent. And when he's healthy, he's a goal scorer. I mean, he's almost a goal scorer, and he's also can be a he can help out his teammates. But if he sucks in the defense, he can lay it off and somebody else can score. So
yeah,
I think he's effective in both ways that way. But one player who we see all the time, who plays for St. Louis, is William Eske, and he kind of flies under the radar, but he's a player that's got tremendous speed.
Yeah,
and he is very opportunistic. And so he's a guy that you have to keep an eye on. Sometimes you're like, no, don't, like maybe we don't need to pay attention to him, but all of a sudden he's got 2 goals, and you're like, where'd he come from? So
yeah.
I'm going to lean to Victor Pereras.
Both excellent players. I played with Will and obviously against Will and Victor both many times, and I actually played with Will in a futsal invitational and was really surprised with how technical he is, considering that what you see a lot of in indoor is his transitional ability, right? You see that he can transition, that he can really explode, that he's so fast. It's crazy how fast he is, which is something I've never experienced. I've never actually just been like, cool, you and me are going to go run that way and I'm going to get there first. Like, that's not a thing that I've ever been able to do in my life. So seeing somebody who makes it look so easy just blows my mind. But he's very technical. What's that, Eric? You're going to tell me that
can I give a bonus pick to somebody who embarrassed the Comets last year with like 10 seconds is Christian Segura from Utica. He absolutely put 3 guys on the ground in that wild card game in the playoffs. So, I mean, there's a lot of talented players in the Eastern Division.
It's
Eric, I was
impossible
thinking about him. I was thinking about him, but we should talk about him because he went through the whole team, Eric. He didn't go through 3. I think he went through 5. I think he went through all 6 players.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was one of the most unbelievable goals I've seen in my entire life. And I mean, he did. He went through the whole team. That was amazing. He
used to be a big pain in the butt for us when he was in San Diego, and he actually scored the game tying goal. We were leading them in double overtime, and he scored about to go to the mini game, and he scored with like 8 seconds to go in the game to send it to overtime, which then went to double overtime, and then we gave up a goal right at the end of double overtime. But he's a very technical player, and he had a little bit of a down season last year, I think, right? And then this year came back up and had a bit of an up. I think that, by the way, is a really interesting topic to maybe talk about later if we have time, but the consistency of certain players and why Ian Bennett is able to put it up for that many, and why Leo Gibson and why Frank Tayu and those names that seem to keep doing it year after year at a level that is consistent. That's a super interesting conversation. But yeah, he's a super technical player, very good player. And Utica between Segura, between Moy Gonzalez. Actually, I think Moy is he now in Baltimore?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well, they had the Gordy Gerson crew that they had that whole crew that was sort of overtime killers. They were really hot last year. But yeah, let's go. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and Mijatovic, it didn't seem like a good fit in St. Louis. And sometimes, if you've experienced this, sometimes you just need a change of scenery.
Yeah.
Right fit, right culture, coach who wants you, and good things happen.
Yeah, no, I think Stefan was in St. Louis and it was different. And I think But soccer is all about, I think. I mean, Evan McNeely last year. I had a season where I was kind of doing okay, and then I hit a point and I made a jump. And Evan McNeely was just kept preaching balance to me. He's just like, balance in life, balance, find balance, find balance. And I think that's it. Like, and balance sometimes means you're with people that like you, that you're friends with, and that respect you, and being given more freedom or less freedom or whatever that individual person needs. But yeah, interesting. So if Evan, if you're watching, balance. I listened. I was paying attention. Targets in the East. You've got some really good ones.
Oh, all right. I'll go first here. He was in the running for MVP, and I'm going back to Baltimore. Lucas Roque,
Yeah.
who is, I mean, he gets the ball. He is terrific in traffic. He reads the game well. What is he averaged like 2.6, 2.8 points a game last year. When he's in the game for 60 minutes, he's going to produce some points. He's going to score goals. He's going to set you up for assists. He'll get you power play goals. Just a smart player, super talented and consistent. Like one of those players, I think, who's pretty consistent throughout the season.
So, great pick. Target's sort of tricky because you have like traditional targets versus like an off forward who kind of plays out wide, and that's where I would put Bennett. I don't see Bennett as a back to goal turnaround target player. He's more of like a tweener there, and so you've got Gordy and Utica, but since Nick Vasos always encourages me to stir the pot, let's just throw down Derek Huffman from Milwaukee, because why not? Comets fans are going to pick at my house. He played defender. He's played forward. He gets into people's heads. And if you look at Milwaukee last year and the turnaround, they had a really non-Milwaukee year 2 seasons ago and got embarrassed by San Diego in the playoffs. And Jules made some changes, and he put Huffman up at target. There's confidence there, and he and Bennett played well, I thought, off each other. I mean, part of it, Nick, I'd say, because you have firsthand experience in this, are you looking at the target to be the guy, the goal scorer? Or are you looking for combinations there and have players to make runs off of them?
Yeah, I mean, the old school, the way that I learned to play a target was Tozer used to set up a drill where basically he would knock a ball into you, and you'd have a guy who was there chomping at your ankles, and he would tell you, listen, I should be able to go grab a coffee, come back on the field, and you should still have that ball. That's all we care about. We don't care about anything else. You hold the ball, you're a good target. Now, you'll get your goals because eventually a play will develop, and you'll get a back post tap in, or you'll find an opening. But your job is to hold the ball. And actually, I think Derek did a really good job holding the ball last year. And a lot of the goals that Milwaukee was scoring, especially with somebody like Ian, who kind of feeds off of that layoff, were off of his holding the ball up and turning. And I think it's probably the hardest skill. And it looks very easy when you're watching it, but it's probably the hardest skill is being able to hold the ball while looking through traffic at an oncoming, like a run. And I think Leo is a guy who has done that particularly better than most players historically that I've seen play over the last 20 years or so, of holding the ball and being able to pick your head up through traffic and finding a pass, because I think it's really hard to do. Some players are really good at holding the ball and they can hold it for hours. And some players have the presence to be able to hold it and then do this one, which is really hard. And I think Derek did a good job of that last year at Milwaukee. And I think that Giuliano was a target that was never really known for being a big bruiser. He was a more technical, more intelligent target. And he was always one that could find passes that were very special. So I think that's a great pick. And I think Ian Bennett, as you guys mentioned earlier with Max, needs somebody around him that is able to free up space for him. And when that does happen, I think he's probably one of the most, well, he's the most consistent finisher in this league, having come from not being that. Because when I played with Ian, he was not a 45, 50 goal a year player. And the knock on Ian at the time was he gets a lot of chances because of how explosive he is, but he just doesn't really finish them. And I think he's changed that. He's changed that, and he's now gotten to a place where you know he's going to score. It's a guarantee that he's going to score. So I think that a lot of work has been put in there by Ian to cultivate his game to that, and also by Jules to find a target that is really, I thought, was super effective. And again, being a target is it's your job should be, I think, and it sounds like I'm preaching for myself. You should have more assists than goals, I think, because your job should be back to goal, facing and holding and laying off. So Ian Bennett should have more goals than Huffman, and Huffman should have more assists than Ian, which I think is the way it played out last year. And Leo traditionally had more assists than goals, I think, if you look at it or it was really close always.
His point production
play.
Very level, Nick. It was as many goals as assists. It was uncanny. Every year after year after year, same goals, same assists. It was amazing.
Well, this year I was very fortunate and blessed to get my 400th point, and it happened to be my 200th goal and my 200th assist at the time. So that was a very cool stat for me. But it depends how you play. You look at a Frank Taillou who plays as a target, whose role within his team is very different, right? His role is more, can I receive it and can I turn and facilitate a turn and attract attention that way, which then opens up midfielders to have a little bit more space and play. And he gets obviously a lot more goals than assists, but it's just, it depends on your philosophy of the game. But obviously, being a target isn't always the most fun, but there you go. Thanks, Pete, for throwing that up. 15 goals, 16 assists last season. Perfect, right? Uncanny right there. Right on the money, pretty much, to do it.
So Nick, let me ask you a coach question, because it always intrigues me when Phil Salvaggio decides how he wants to mark Taillou. Do you man mark the guy, or do you just do regular shifts? I mean, or does it depend on the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. It's a tough one. I think it's based on the scenario. There are targets that you've got to mark very differently. For example, and I'll say it, we never double Leo Gibson, because if you double Leo Gibson, he's good enough to find an out pass. So you leave him 1v1 with someone that you think can force him physically to not turn. Wayne Dan says you're going to have people at your house now for your comment. But Leo Gibson, you don't double. For example, that's how we coach. We don't double him because he's so good at finding it. There are players that if we think that maybe technically on their first touch they won't be able to beat you out of pressure, you may double. And there are players that we think that you can crowd a space and shift them in a general direction. But it really depends on the player. I think that is difficult. And the matchups, right? There's players that we will say, Frank is a great example. You can play against Frank. And I think last year, we've got Logan Jones, who's I say young, but he's a player who's been coming through our team for 4 or 5 years now and slowly getting sort of momentum. And last year was, I think, his breakout year in terms of his consistency. He did a really good job last year when we played, especially Empire against Frank, in just being disciplined, having your head sort of on a swivel at all times of thinking through the scenarios, knowing when to be physical, knowing when not to be physical. So I think it's matchups. And I remember the COVID game in Kansas City. Leo was coaching for you guys, obviously, and the entire game plan, I think you guys zoned in the back with 2, so our target never got the ball. And we ended up having to break it by setting up 4 at the top to outnumber your 3, because there was a whole different setup there. But each coach has got their philosophy that they think is going to work. And then at the end of the game, you look at the scoreboard. And there was a game that we had Pablo marking Frank, and Pablo was like, "Oh man, I put Frank in my pocket." And how many goals did Frank have? He had 5 goals that game. So even if you think that you've got somebody in your pocket, or that you physically in the game that he's not getting the ball a lot, the good players are going to find a way to score a goal. I mean, no matter how well you do. There's so many games that Frank, you felt like he's not there. Craig Childs, you feel like he doesn't get a lot of touches, but suddenly you look up the scoreboard, you're losing by 5, and he's got 4 goals, and you don't know how that happened, right? So I think it's a tough question, but it's one that every coach tries to answer their own way, I guess.
Pete put up a great stat. Leo's career: 228 goals, 222 assists, 450 points.
Incredible. Well, what's Leo going to do? What are we doing? Is he playing next year?
I mean, I don't know for sure. I don't think so.
Okay.
But
Let's see.
I don't. I mean, I mean, I think he can still play. I mean, I know he can still play. But does Leo want to play? This year coming into this season, Leo really wanted to step back. He wanted to coach. He wanted to leave it to the players on the field. But injuries and availability to players because of visa forced
issues.
the Comets' hands to put Leo back on the field. And
well, he didn't have a bad season. Didn't have a bad season. 33 points for a sort of part-time player is not a bad season. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
He was like a utility player though last year. He played
in the back sometimes. He played on man
attacker.
down.
Yeah. First game they went to St. Louis. It's always going to be a battle, Kansas City, St. Louis, no matter where they went. He wanted to coach it, and it was clear right away you needed to get on the field because they were lost.
I was watching that game, and he was in like a full sweatsuit, and I was like, "Come on, man! Tell me you got the uniform under that sweatsuit because they need you out there right now." Well, let's have a couple things. Close up with the Stars stuff. Let's talk about the Stars for a few minutes here. Players in our team that obviously we've talked about Danny Waltman, we've talked about Corey Keats. Are there players on our team that you guys are particularly excited to see this upcoming season, or players that you've picked out as special players on our team that you can talk about?
Always Ramos. In fact, normally that's who I would pick because everybody's going to say the player to watch is Nick Perera. That kind of goes without saying. But for me, Ramos was impressive in that All-Star game here in Kansas City. He just every year, I mean, the consistency, I like it. I respect his game, and he's always fun to watch.
Yeah, I think Ramos. If I was a bookie, and you said who's going to have a big year for the Tacoma Stars this year, I would put my money on Ramos this year. He's been training in the off season. He's been really looking after sort of his himself in terms of his overall health and life and fitness, and I think he's really going to make have a big impact. We just knocked it around on Thursday night, and he was flying. So if he keeps that sort of consistency going, I think he's going to be a terror this year.
Nick, I'm going to go against the rules here. I'm going to say Danny Waltman. I mean, anytime Tacoma comes to town, you've got Danny Waltman on your team. Fans are going to, Danny's coming? I'm going to come to the game. I want to see Danny. I want to say hi to him. And because everybody loves Danny Waltman because of his story and because of his play in Kansas City. I'm a huge Danny Waltman fan. Of course, so many people are. And I just when he's coming to town, it's like, here comes Danny. Let's find out what's going on. So it's always about Danny Waltman.
He seems to save some of the best, which for Danny's standing, his best is like really best. He seems to save it for the Kansas City Comets in Kansas City. He came on at halftime of the All-Star game and had like a quadruple save. I think there was like I remember there was a play where the ball kept bouncing in the box and he kept getting up and saving it and getting up and saving it and getting up and saving it. And it was like insane momentum that he just sort of carried through. And last year, the same thing. When we went to KC, he stood on his head in a couple massive saves. And everybody loves him over there so much. It's like you walk in the building, it feels like a home game for him. So, he's had some special performances for the Stars over the years. And special sort of underplays it. I think I tell him this all the time. He's been playing for the Stars. I've only been here for 6 or 7 years. But what he's produced for the Stars over the last 10 years is only going to be noticed in 10 years, 15 years time when that's not there anymore. And you're going to go, oh my God, I can't believe the amount of work Danny has done for that team in terms of saves, distribution, leadership, communication. And just, Danny's always been one of those legendary shot stoppers where you think you've got him beat, right? The good forwards will tell you, I've got him beat. And somehow he gets something on it. And he comes out with his chest all brave like this and makes those chest saves. So he's had some special performances in that building that have been for the Comets and against the Comets. But special player.
Well, I'll throw another memory. You said you don't want to remember that T-Mobile game, but I vividly recall a press conference right afterwards, and he graciously took questions, and it was a one-sided game, but he was really professional about the way he carried himself, the experience, and that's what you need as a coach, as a GM, et cetera, are character guys like that who will represent your colors, represent your franchise that well. And that for me just solidified it.
I tell the story all the time. My first ever game for the Stars, I came, and it was against Ontario, and we won, which at the time, I mean, those games of Ontario Tacoma have always been heated games. And we won, and I scored, I think, a goal or two in my first game. And here in Tacoma, we have these on-field signings where we sign play. Everybody can come on the field, and we do autograph signings. And I'm thinking in my head, right, people are going to be like clamoring for my signature, right? This is like your typical ego moment. And so I go stand at this podium, and Danny's at the podium with me, and he'd been there before me. So I got there and I stand next to him because I've known him for a long time. And so I go to start signing, and I quickly realize that there's this massive line, and I'm thinking in my head, like, oh yeah, they're for me. And there's literally like 400 people waiting for Danny, and there's like one person in my line, and parents are starting to go, hey, while we're waiting for Danny, do you want to just get that guy's signature while we're there? And I'm like, so it was the most humble pie ever. But I mean, that's still to this day.
Oh, that's a great story, Nick. Oh, thanks for sharing that. That is an awesome story. That is great. That is great.
Well, last thing we'll talk about before we go, give us some predictions for this year. Give us some standings predictions. Like, I just told you Mike Ramos is going to be up there in the league with points. Give me something shot out of a cannon. Something that in 6 months' time, somebody on Facebook that's watching this thing can go rub in your face.
Well, I'm looking at the league website, and it isn't clear how many divisions there are going to be or conferences. So I'm like really stuck with what. So let me do this. If San Diego overtakes Chihuahua, then Phil Salvaggio will have earned a repeat Coach of the Year, because he has not only so much talent there, but he's going to have to manage a lot of talent there. How do you figure out a team that was stacked, and then you make space for the Rookie of the Year, Gabriel Costa, who was unbelievable in the soccer tournament? Then you add in Drew Ruggles. How do you make that all work? And if you can figure out a way to do that, I think this is going to be a good year for San Diego. On the Eastern side, let's just assume that there's two divisions. Yeah, I think Kansas City will be better, but next year I think is Everton's opportunity to prove that Utica wasn't just a flash in the pan. And if he can figure out how he wants to use Mo Ndiaye in a creative way up there, those might be two interesting teams to watch for next year.
I mean, that's really not anything too. Can I get something better, Nick? That's like not, give us something real here. Give us something that's like, take a risk.
Honestly,
take a risk.
He took the words right out of my mouth. I think Utica has a chance to make a big jump this year, whether that's in the East or another type of division. And Everton's got something going up there. So I think Utica could be better this year. The Comets, I think, will be a little better than they were last year.
I'll give you mine.
You know what? It's hard to predict in this league.
Milwaukee will be the highest placed team in the Eastern Division if they do a division. Milwaukee will have the highest place. That's my shot out of the cannon.
I think that's fair, and I haven't used the word goalkeeping. I've seen it in the chat. I think that Willie B was underappreciated for what he brought to that team. They went from a goalkeeper that with Lemos, who was so good with his feet. Willie B is a shot stopper, maybe not the same kind of shot stopper as Danny Waltman is, but there was a huge pivot bringing him in, and I think that. My only concern about Milwaukee is legs and age. If Jules can figure out getting more time for some of the young guys, Sanchez impressed me last year. There's some good first year and second year players. They can get additional shifts. I think that's going to help some of the guys who have been carrying the weight for so many years?
Let me give you guys a stat that I tell our team about all the time. Most indoor soccer teams, if you remove special teams, end up tying the game. You take away special teams, especially the veteran teams. Baltimore, you look at just regular run of play, it ends up being very close. 2-2, 3-3, 2-1, 3-2. Now, what makes a team over the edge in indoor is their ability on special teams, restarts, and power plays. So, Milwaukee's got, with Ricardo Carvalho now and Luan, two of the more dangerous left-footed players in the league in terms of restarts. With Marcio on the ball, probably one of the better passers, if not one of the best passers in the league on the ball. Ian Bennett on the right to finish. I think in terms of their ability to take their power play unit and their restart team up, I think it's going to go up. And I think that in the run of play, things are what they are. And if you'll remember those Vlatko teams, I could close my eyes and I can see Sosa passing the ball down low left to Vahid or Leo Gibson for a first time near post shot. And you've done it a million times. I can see Lucas Rodriguez on the left getting the ball cut down to him, and how dangerous those restarts are. And I think that when you talk about veteran-heavy teams and even aging teams, what are older players really good at that they've played indoor a long time?
Set pieces.
Set pieces. Yep.
Power plays. So I think Milwaukee has got something special brewing there with that restart and power play team. Now, I will also say that of those four players we mentioned, three of them are Brazilians. And if you've ever been in a locker room with too many Brazilian players, who's going to go on the ball and who's going to do what? That might be a fist fight before we even get to the field. But they've certainly got the quality there. And to be fair, KC have still got Sosa on the ball, which is always dangerous. Super clever, and one of those players that I think that if you see John Sosa play or you see John Sosa walking down the street, you probably wouldn't think this guy is one of the best defenders in the league and one of the smartest guys out there. But he gets on the ball, he never loses the ball, he makes the right pass every single time, he always finds the open guy. He's a pest to play against because he's just clever, and he's one of those guys that makes life difficult. And that's, I mean, honestly, John Sosa's Colombian originally, right? And
yep.
We've got Alex, and they're both very similar. Alex is a super clever guy. You can't close your eyes because anything can happen at any point. They don't lose the ball. They've got a little bit of a swagger to them, right? A little cockiness swagger, which I think every team needs. But if you ask me, the shot out of the cannon, I think that Milwaukee's one to keep their eyes on, and I think Chihuahua is going to have a year that's not going to be as dominant as last year, if you had to ask me, because I think the apparition of potentially another Mexican team, I think, changes the dynamics down there a bit, and I think that could unsettle some things.
Well, Monterrey was my biggest disappointment last year because I expected a lot more. They are making roster changes. They obviously in goal they've made a change, but I hear there's more changes coming. It's really hard because if you go to the MASL website, what you see for Kansas City isn't what you're going to get, and there are a lot of spaces on that Tacoma Stars page, TBD. So it's really hard today to say these are the teams that'll be on the field.
I had a fan come up to me at our last fan fest and say, "I don't see Nick Perera on the sheet. Are you playing this year?" And I said, "You got to tune in to Stars Align. You got to tune in to come back. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, listen, we've been trying from the Stars to make to really work on what I think is important to work on is the business of the club, and how do we make the business sustainable, which then impacts the sporting side, right? I think, as recently as maybe Florida, and I don't know the story behind it, I don't know what happened, but I think when you focus primarily on exclusively on-field talent and how you can do that, and you don't know that you've got the backside of it taken care of, it can be very difficult. We've always had such amazing fan support in Tacoma and amazing community engagement. And like I said, our entire off-season push has been, how do we engage with our community? How do we get more people to feel like the Stars is actually part of their family as opposed to this thing that they do on a weekend? How do we bring them in the house? How do we get our players to go from inside the clubhouse to out and help our community We're going to have a huge program we're actually launching in September when school kicks back, called Stars in Schools, where we're basically going to visit a ton of schools, handing out with a presentation on nutrition. Perera's fighting with the GM. On nutrition, on healthy lifestyle, and things that we can help impact young kids. Saludos, Jesus, and how we can help impact our community that way, which I think is going to really be something that will help kids. And honestly, our job, I think, as soccer players, first and foremost, is to try to impact how we can be good role models, how we can help our community, how we can help kids with a better future, or help them direct themselves a little bit better. And at the end of the day, we're an entertainment business, right? So if people aren't having fun when they get to watch a soccer game, then we don't need to be there. And that goes for all forms of soccer. I mean, I don't need to be a hater here, but watching outdoor soccer the last sort of 2-3 years has been super boring. I find that there's just not as much fun. And indoor soccer, it's like that you can't turn your eyes off ever. So I'm a big fan, obviously, of indoor soccer, and I'm assuming you guys are too, considering you're still hanging around. But yeah, I mean, thanks for coming on, and like I said, we're gonna do a announcers roundup at some point here, because the Empire team wants to do an announcers team, come on the Stars Align and have maybe a game show between all of you guys talking about things in the league. But I really respect you guys taking the time, and thank you. And I respect that the amount of knowledge you guys are pouring into every fan that gets to listen to your game. And regardless of me scoring a goal and having a terrible announcer, that's fine. Next time, let's just get a little bit more excited, please, guys. A little bit more excitement, please.
Well, no, thanks for having us on. We respect you. We expect your franchise. Obviously, there's great connections with Lane too, and everything that we always say, whether it's talking to other announcers and Empire, we stand ready to help. So there's anything we can do for the Stars, Nick and I are here to serve.
Nick, you've just been volunteered to serve, pal. So just be ready.
Well, I'll say this has been a treat, because we've gotten Nick Perera for more than just 45 seconds on the sidelines at Cable Del Marino with the headset on during the All-Star game. It's like, hey, Nick, we were supposed to talk to you for a little bit.
Sorry.
And he just took the headset off and he was gone. So, but this has been really fun to chat with you and to get your insight. And, after talking to you, I'm energized. I'm ready to go. I'm inspired. Let's have a great season, and let's spread the word as far and wide as we can. And this has been fun. I mean, anytime that we can get together and chit chat about indoor soccer, I'm all for it. And I hope we're going to have a terrific year this year.
Well, we appreciate you guys coming on, being a part of it, and being fun, being fun loving, and not feeling offended if I say something about you. But again, thank you guys all for joining. Thanks for coming. We love indoor soccer. Keep following us. If you have friends who love indoor soccer, they need to know about us. And we'd love to welcome everybody into the Stars family, and obviously the MASL family as a whole. So from the Stars Alliance, Tacoma Stars, get your tickets up here for August 19th, right? I think it's right there, to come watch us play against the Whistle All-Stars. It's going to be an amazing game at the Tacoma Soccer Center, 4 p.m. Get your tickets here, right there. And we'll see you soon. Thanks very much. Go Stars.